One of the most effective tactics in keeping us stuck in a regressive loop in our lives is also the same tactic that so many gurus use when they tell us it's easy to overcome a bad habit. Let's talk about shame and why shaming tactics will never bring us to true happiness. From visits to the doctor to deliberately seeking out self-help gurus' advice, we typically feel all sorts of emotions during those processes. But one of the deep-rooted ones that so many of us experience in those moments is shame. Not for the fact that we're there, mind you, but rather for the fact that doctors' offices or self-help guru seminars are typically places where our flaws or bad habits are revealed to us and spoken about in extensive details. Flaws or bad habits that time and again we vow to overcome, deal with, or fix. All to little avail despite our best efforts to do so.
Yikes.
And instead of being told genuinely helpful advice or given deeper explanations of our problems, we're told or sold on something completely different. At least in most cases with self-help gurus. It can all seem very well-meaning, but as so many other people in the past can attest to, feeling shame or being shamed by others implicitly or explicitly has never really worked in solving our own problems or having the motivation to solve our problems.
I can't take any more. I can't do this.
As kids, it's psychologically damaging. And as adults, it's often the emotion that drives us to be sitting in those seminar seats and hoping that a guru will write or say something that'll make everything click together and we can finally move on with our lives. But that hope is ill-founded, as shaming in general, especially for our bad habits, is one of the worst things that we can do for our happiness and well-being. And in this video, I'll be explaining why. In a roughly half-hour-long video, Dr. Becky Kennedy, clinical psychologist, mom of 3, and founder of the online platform Good Inside, outlined 2 basic principles that she uncovered at her practice with regards to handling and punishing kids. For the longest time, her solutions to dealing with problem kids has always been to use sticker charts for incentivizing good habits and timeouts to discourage bad ones. But ever since she had her first child, she started to realize how ineffective those kinds of strategies actually were and created 2 foundational principles that she uses to this day. The first is that all kids are born good inside. This doesn't normalize their bad behavior, but as she argues, this foundation serves as a distinguishing factor between identity and behavior. It overall raises the question, why does someone good do something bad? But the second crucial point is that kids have all of the feelings, but none of the skills that adults do to properly process the emotion. As a result, all the feelings that kids express tend to come out as just bad behavior to us adults. And while all of this has to do with kids and correcting bad behavior, what Dr. Kennedy is talking about broadly is applicable to how we, as adults, usually handle our perceived bad habits. From swear jars to telling a friend we'll give them $100 every time we skip the gym, we've got it wired in our head that consequences to our actions or habit reform will ultimately shape our character. That suffering will improve our character. And when there is no punishment involved, the bad habits that we have will only get worse as they get reinforced. But the question that we really should be asking is whether any of that is actually true. Because when we look at bad habits and trying to reform them with threats, consequences, or shame, it's worth asking, what do we actually gain from any of that?
Nothing! say nothing.
Do we actually feel motivated to make a change in our lives after using any of these tactics on ourselves? Because from my own personal experiences, and I'm sure plenty of other people, we tend to lose out on picking up valuable skills that make habit building just easier for us. Not to mention, it can be traumatizing or lead to more relapses, which typically results in us bashing ourselves more and creating more of a problem rather than fixing the problem. Not that long ago, one of my shorts on self-discipline had a random comment talking about the fact that I have a second chin. I'm not particularly bothered by that comment, but if I wasn't already working on improving my health and losing weight, the sort of sentiment doesn't actually encourage me to lose weight. In fact, if I didn't have the emotional intelligence and understanding of myself, I would have been more likely to abandon my weight loss journey entirely, or even bother honing the skills that I've gained from this part of my life, like cooking and checking ingredients for anything dubious, or having an understanding of my body's reaction to food or exercise and making sure that I'm exercising properly. And the big reason for why I wouldn't be honing these skills at all is because I'd be way too busy psychologically bashing myself and trying to prove to the commenter that, or whoever is making a comment, on just how mean they are or whatever. I'd be wasting my time rather than actually focusing on trying to address the particular issue that is in my life. You would be no exception to this kind of behavior if you were in that kind of situation and using shame tactics as a means of improving yourself, especially when we consider that shame keeps us pinned down in so many other distinct ways. One of these enablers comes from something that a lot of the self-help industry struggles to deal with. The fact that so many gurus have no clue who you are, what your aspirations are, or why you're even here. Even me. But this anonymity creates a problem in so many ways. For one, it leads to this broad and general advice that we see time and time again, and also a push for more pseudoscience kind of advice or pop psychology. However, amongst the more aggressive self-help gurus, shame tactics come off as more tone-deaf and mentally damaging than actually helpful. It can seem well-meaning on the surface, especially as certain gurus like Tony Robbins has employed this in the past extensively, and plenty of his fans have said this has been very helpful for them. But even still, it is still a gamble on whether this is actually going to be very helpful or if it's just going to reinforce a very regressive loop and no improvement whatsoever. This is beyond the fact that gurus like Tony Robbins don't even bother about growing or improving or changing their strategies to try and be more helpful for people. These gurus haven't really learned that bad habits aren't just things that we casually pick up, but rather our overall environment can encourage it. If you're poor and unemployed, you're far more likely to get addicted to drugs, alcohol, or gambling. To recover from those addictions means solving the root problem, which often means getting a job and having a proper home. It won't solve all of the bad habits all at once, of course. But many gurus overlook how our existing life situations create particular habits for ourselves and enable these bad habits in the first place, and they don't even bother about addressing these, especially when they are pretty common ones. Being disabled or suffering from debilitating diseases makes it that much harder for us to lose weight or be healthy individuals. Being poor makes it very difficult to pay for expensive self-help guru courses that could potentially steer us in the right direction and fix our lives. And adding in shame tactics into that mixture can only worsen these situations for the sheer fact that in those kinds of scenarios, people need to overcome these hurdles before they even get to dealing with the initial problem. It effectively creates far more work for those lagging behind, and this feeling that they're dealing with an impossible task. And it's also very counterintuitive when self-help gurus present their solutions as simple or easy to follow or do, or employing more shame tactics, that you should be crushing your goals or dominating them or whatever. Even if you're not dealing with those particular scenarios that I outlined, we can all still experience something similar to this and get the same kind of results. If you can't cook, or you work long hours out of necessity and have to order food a bunch, that's going to be a barrier if you want to be losing weight, let alone eating healthy meals, for example. And if shame doesn't make you feel nihilistic about your situations, it only reinforces the same feelings you felt that got you doing that bad habit in the first place. A feeling of need or addiction. Back in the 1990s, one of the programs I was introduced to as a kid was the DARE program. Originally started in the United States, the messaging of this program was a pretty simple one: don't do drugs. Delivered by one of the local cops, the program more specifically was about teaching kids how to say no to drugs, and that avoiding drugs was as simple as saying no when they were being offered to us. Needless to say, the DARE program isn't around these days because of one particular issue the program had. It didn't work.
Éxito.
Obviously, right?
Silly me.
There are several reasons that explain why this program was destined to fail from the very beginning. So much so that a scathing study found skipping those classes would be more informative in drug abuse resistance than being in that class. The fact that a cop was teaching this rather than a teacher means, depending on your own skin color and neighborhood that you're living in, you'll have widely different feelings and views of the police, and therefore their teaching methods. Then there's the fact that messaging didn't go that much deeper into detail about avoiding drugs in the first place. The police didn't explain why these drugs were used in the first place. Just that people think that they're cool, but they're not. And we should say no to them. Great. Thanks, DARE program. But likely the biggest reason why DARE is a relic of the past is the program didn't really change our overall perception of drugs, but rather our overall behavior if we found ourselves indulging in it. This is all too similar to bad habits that we're trying to overcome, whether it's drug addiction, overeating, or any other bad habit. We don't need people to tell us that certain things are bad or that we shouldn't do them. It's a known psychological fact that when we do something like that, it only creates this incentivization to explore that sort of thing. And people who were uninformed or were unaware of the existence of this will actually be more curious and be more inclined to try that out rather than be deterred. Because for us, the taboo or forbidden is always alluring to us in some way, shape, or form. Even if we can't explain it, putting certain activities behind bars or restrictions just creates an incentive for us. And the more that we shame ourselves or pile on that it's bad for us, the more challenging it becomes for us to actually reform that behavior and avoid this bad habit in the first place. We deliberately put ourselves into a loop where reform through punishment is seemingly the only way to get us to change, when there are so many examples of this strategy just not working for us. But on top of that, there is one final hidden element for why shaming bad habits and shaming overall doesn't help us in being happier. The final hidden element is one that's been coming up more and more and isn't exactly as hidden as it used to be. It's the fact that shame overall makes us more isolated in our lives. But to really understand the depth of this isolation and why it's being brought up now, I had to talk about those other elements first because they all compound onto this one feeling. And arguably, this is probably one other aspect as to why self-help is often done by ourselves and is so individually focused right now. Without a doubt, whenever we're looking to address bad habits or problem behavior, we experience a little bit of shame. To our core, we are inherently good people who think highly of ourselves, and bad habits or bad behavior contradicts that perception and encourages us to make a change to improve ourselves. But if we struggle to address that issue or are given such bad advice, and are left in the dark about how we can personally deal with this problem, one of our knee-jerk reactions is to be more secretive and slink away. After all, we're never really given the tools to deal with a problem or have a person in our corner that actually cares about us, that is willing to walk us through it. This broadly encompasses why so many of us are isolated and lonely these days. Sharing too much info about our personal lives is too overbearing for other people. Wanting to hang out all the time is too clingy, and not enough means that we're neglectful and a bad friend and bad person to be around. And then there is the whole push for seeking therapists and counselors to discuss any and every little issue, because if we ever decide to share a little to others about our problems, we're trauma dumping.
That's rough, buddy.
Not that we shouldn't be seeking therapy, mind you, but all of this talk creates a sense that whenever we have a problem with ourselves, be it behavior or habits, it's our responsibility to deal with this problem ourselves, alone, or some random third party if we can afford it. And in the case where therapy can't help in a specific situation, we're left with trying to get through the problem ourselves without much guidance or someone to lean on and talk things over, furthering that sense of isolation and relying on things like willpower or major talking points from manosphere bros to tide us over. And they just don't work for the reasons that I've brought up earlier. But isolation goes one step further, because when we do experience shame, it only gets us to slink deeper into that habit and never change it. Upon researching for this script, it got me thinking a lot about why I struggle with talking to other people or being engaging on social media. And part of that is just a sense of shame that I've been carrying for a very long time. It's a reinforcement that I have nothing of importance to offer, or that my views don't really matter. This is despite the fact that I have this channel and I do have opinions, and it's just a hallmark for a lot of my life. It's very weird. It's a weird sense of thought process for me. And most importantly, I've also used some of the talkback or social flubs that I have made in the past as reasons to isolate myself further and slink away, rather than trying to deal with this emotion in a more healthier manner. And I'm sure that you can draw parallels to certain parts of your life through my social anxiety as well. All that shaming really does is just drives us further away from solving the problem. And this kind of talk in self-help further drives a wedge between all of us lifting up one another and visualizing that this is all just one big race and that we're all competing against one another. When in reality, that sort of visualization and shaming only drives us apart in so many ways. Even though culturally we're told that shame and shaming others is the answer to discouraging bad behavior or bad habits, our lives don't have to be like this. Especially when we should know by now that these tactics are not working. Instead of trying to heap on more shame on ourselves or on other people, we need to be looking beyond that as individuals. I recall when fat shaming was becoming far more popular of a tactic, The body positivity movement sprang up in order to counteract that. Fat shaming isn't helping by any stretch of the imagination, but body positivity has some good and bad parts about how we should deal with bad habits, how we view them, and how to overcome them. For one, body positivity does have it right that we should broadly accept others as themselves. Similarly, we should broadly accept our bad habits and our flaws as well. Not to be nihilistic and never change, as body positivity can certainly imply that, but accepting that part of ourselves is significantly better than telling ourselves bad habit is bad and that we should be ashamed if we ever relapse. Therapists know by now that relapsing is in itself part of the recovery process of various addictions. And so shaming when that happens doesn't really help, because it's not going to reinforce a recovery process. It's just going to isolate that person and discourage them from trying to push forward and make amends and fix that problem. Beyond that, we need to drive further sense of community and communication. Rather than just telling our friend we'll give them $100 if we fail to do this one thing, we forge a deeper bond with them and share our struggles and problems with one another. We get our friends and community to actually give a damn about what we're doing and how we're improving our lives, and talk about the problems that we're dealing with. We forge those deeper bonds so people will automatically feel this natural connection and want to follow up and check on you. In the end, overcoming bad habits has multiple layers to it. Some can be strained by systemic problems or cultural views, of course. Others can just be our personal demons that we've been dealing with. Nevertheless, if we approach these problems with more compassion, empathy, and less shaming tendencies, the more I think we'll be able to actually grow and resolve bad habits and a lot of other bigger problems as well. Thank you guys so much for watching the entirety of this video. It would really mean a lot to me if you'll press on the like button and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I love you guys.